What's up everyone, welcome back to Blade Bias. Today it's time to talk about these things because as I said in the last video, I have spent some time with them, tried out all the different weights, I've tried out all the different things. I'm going to use the Prysma to show off to talk about my thoughts on these things because I think the Prysma is the best use case for these. It's an extremely neutral or in some cases blade biased balisong, whereas everything else in my collection, besides maybe the Vulp, is handle biased, extremely handle biased, so I'm not really looking to use something that's going to make them even more handle biased. Anyway, Prysma is going to be what I use to show these things off. Let's talk about the Zippy end caps, because when I did my first impressions video, I had mentioned that I had only used the 3-weight distribution. As you can see, or maybe you can't, maybe I'm not framing this right, there's 3 little balls in there. And that takes the weight of these things from, I believe, like 0.1 to 0.3 ounces or something like that. So you're adding on a lot of weight with all 3 variations in it. Now, while I do think that there is a legitimate, I think that these things are really cool. Changing the balance with little add-ons you can add on to the end of basically any balisong is super cool, and these things turn any balisong into a momentum carrying monster. If you have a balisong that doesn't really carry momentum very well and you get a pair of these, it will carry momentum 10 times better than you ever could have imagined it would. And while it is modular and I really like that, I don't really see anyone using the 3 weights. Maybe they do, and don't get me wrong, I know there's a lot of people who like a lot of handle bias, but the 3 weights in the end of the Prysma make it feel like a Kraken trainer, is the best way I can describe it. It fans a little better than the Kraken trainer, but you can see that it's like a V shape as opposed to a flat line, because there's a huge discrepancy in weights at the end of the handles versus the blade. So it makes the Prysma extremely handle biased. Granted, it carries momentum amazingly and it sticks to your finger really, really well. But for me personally, 3 weights is not really what I'm looking to use these things with. Does that change with 2 weights? Also, the way to get these out is extremely sketch. You have to press extremely hard to get them out. And it just feels like you're going to break something, which I guess you're not because it's like a moldable plastic, but it just doesn't feel good. I'm not really sure if they could improve that though. So 2 weights. I'm going to be honest, on the Prysma specifically, I don't really think this story changes with 2 weights. It still makes the Prysma feel heavy, and that's something I forgot to mention. There is a noticeable weight difference on the Prysma. That's why I compared it to a Kraken trainer, because it feels like the weight of a Kraken trainer. They may only add 0.3 or 0.4 ounces, but that is a lot of weight on something like a Prysma. So they make the Prysma, the 3 weights just makes the Prysma feel like big, bulky, and unwieldy. And it doesn't really change with the 2 weights. It is a little better, and I could see someone legitimately enjoying this flipping experience because it increases the momentum carrying ability and the handle bias nature of the Prysma. Makes it handle bias without making it feel unwieldy or uncontrollable like the 3 weights do. But it's still not really my thing, so to speak. Like, I'm not a huge fan of how the Prysma flips with the 2 weights in it. I think it is good, and I really like how these end caps look in terms of like tracers, kind of like the Titan, the Bite Blades Titan. So this is more of like an experience that I would actually consider using on my Prysma, but it's still not something that I'm going to use that often. On something like the Vulp, I know I said I would only talk about the Prysma, but 2 weights on the Vulp, you kind of have an argument there because the Vulp does have issues with sticking on chaplains, whereas the Prysma in its default setup, the Prysma doesn't really have a problem with chaplains, to me at least, whereas the Vulp does. So 2 weights on the Vulp increases the chaplain ability of it. So if you liked a chaplain and the Vulp kind of didn't really do it for you, there's definitely something to be said about what these end caps do. although it does, as I mentioned before, decrease the fanning performance, and it does make the vault feel a lot heavier. But if you're a chaplain kind of person, this definitely improves the chaplain ability of the vault. So with 2 weights, we're kind of getting there. It definitely decreases the feeling of uncontrollability in your balisong, while still improving the handle bias nature of it and the momentum carrying ability of it. But still not for me, personally. Now 1 weight is where it gets really interesting. If I can even, there we go. I am also interested to see the durability long-term of the holding mechanism for these. Now 1 weight is where it gets really interesting, because now it is a noticeable difference still, but this is an experience that I could legitimately see myself using, because it feels like a Prysma. It feels a little less blade biased and a lot more neutral, while still carrying, it makes it feel like the Nemesis to me, honestly, where the Nemesis still feels neutral, but it sticks to your fingers because it carries momentum really well, and there's weight in the ends of the handles and the end of the blade. That's kind of how it makes the Prysma feel. While it still fans amazingly, it also chaplains and rollovers really well and carries momentum amazingly. So 1 weight on the Prysma, and I tested it on the Vulp, it does also improve the Vulp a little bit. I kind of like how the Vulp flips stock though. Same with the Prysma. I prefer the Prysma stock, don't get me wrong. But these things do legitimately improve the experience, especially if you're someone who feels that the Prysma is too blade biased. This is where I really see these end caps shining, is 1 weight or maybe even 0 weights. But as we'll get into in a second, 0 weights isn't exactly a perfect experience. Another thing to mention is just the sound. These do legitimately change the sound of your balisong. It makes the Prysma sound a lot deeper and thockier. I'm not really sure what's up with that. Maybe something to do with its absorbing vibrations or whatever. But that's something to keep in mind. It does change the sound. And while it does still make the Prysma feel a bit uncontrollable if you go too fast, I think there is a legitimate reason, for me personally, to use these end caps with 1 weight on the Prysma. Just increases that momentum and that handle bias, as I have been saying constantly. And now no weights is where it gets really interesting, because what you might think is, okay, now it's not going to add any weight. But since the housing, if you can get this thing in the light, you can see this arc right here. And all of this is technically plastic, because that's what holds the weights in. So there is still weight being added if you have no weights in, which is weird to think about. And for that reason, I think it kind of eliminates the ability to use these things for people who just want to protect the end of their balisong handles. And another thing to mention is, because they are moldable plastic, there's weights in the end of the handles. So if you drop them in the right way, and it says this on Zippy's website, if you drop them in the right way, you could mold the plastic so that it pushes inward, and those weights slam into the bottom of your balisong handles. So if you're getting these purely for protection, I would recommend, and I think Zippy would recommend, although I don't speak for him, I'm just going off of what I saw on his website, not putting the weights in. Now, as far as the experience without the weights, this feels like a normal Prysma that carries momentum better. It's not terribly handle biased, but there is a small change there. I would call this the difference between a Kraken trainer, I would call this a difference between a Tonto Kraken and a Bowie Kraken. It's not a lot, but it is still there. But now the Prysma fans a lot more like it normally does. It feels a lot more light and agile like it normally does. But as I keep hammering into the ground, it has those improvements of handle bias and momentum carrying. to make it a really, really good flipper. I think this is, for the Prysma specifically, is my favorite configuration because it still feels like a Prysma, but slightly improved in those key categories. Now, if you ask me personally, if I can pop these off, I prefer the Prysma completely stock. I like how the Prysma flips. It's light, it's agile, it fans super well, and considering its neutral / blade bias nature, sticks to your fingers really, really well. And I'm a huge fan of it. But that by no means means that these things are bad or not worth it. I think the ability to change a balisong's weight distribution or its balance is a super, super cool thing. Especially if you have a balisong, specifically plastic ones that don't carry momentum very well, these things help. And I know that to be a fact. I can't share any details on that because it's a thing that someone doesn't want any content on. But I have tried it on a balisong that doesn't carry momentum super well, and it does improve that situation. So if you have a balisong that you really like, but it doesn't carry momentum the best, look into getting some Zippy caps because they legitimately help. If you have a balisong that's too blade biased, maybe try the Zippy caps. I think they're super, super cool, and they serve a really cool purpose. But if you're looking for something purely to protect the end of your weight, the end of your handles, I will be honest in saying that I would look elsewhere because there is still a slightly noticeable change even without the weights. So as a tool to have fun and to change your balisongs up a little bit, I think the end caps are super, super cool. But as a protection thing, I'm not too sure. If you want something to protect the end of your handles that aren't going to change the experience too much, maybe those aren't the things for you. But at the same time, if you want something that's not going to change the experience too much, and you want the ability to mess around with some fun weight distributions, maybe go for them. I think these things are extremely cool, and I'm actually a huge fan of them. Will I use them on a lot of my balisongs? Probably not, because I like the weight distributions and the balance points of all of my balisongs plenty enough, as they are. But I think they are an extremely, extremely cool thing to have in the community and to have in your collection, even if you only have one pair, and even if you don't use them terribly, terribly often. Okay, if the Vulp wants to stay there, then the Vulp will. But yeah, this video is long enough. Those are my updated thoughts on the Zippy end caps. Probably won't do any updated thoughts on this since it is an open beta. I'll wait to give my opinions on that until everything is a bit more finalized and all the changes that are happening. But thank you all for watching. Go check out the Zippy end caps. They're pretty cool. Anyway, I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.